So today I'd like to talk about Royal Mail, and I'm going to tell a story about what happened to me recently. And once I've told my story about how I'm so angry, I'm going to give 5 things that I think should happen to Royal Mail, and then I'm going to tell you one thing that you can do about it if you care about this essential public service. So the story is this. I was getting ready for Mother's Day and I was a bit disorganised, but I wasn't terribly disorganised. And so I had a parcel to send which had a Mother's Day card and 3 crunchy bars, because my mum loves crunchy bars. And I turned up at the post office, which is one of those town centre post offices. There was a massive queue and people were losing the plot in the queue because it was so long and nobody knew what was going on or when on earth they would ever get served. There was one member of staff behind the desks, tons of desks, but just one member of staff, and then another member of staff behind the travel desk and some machines. And this huge queue was snaking its way through the shop, through the WH Smiths, and everybody was incredibly frustrated. I was talking to people in the queue and people were really, really angry and just explaining their situation. And this isn't something new. I find that this happens again and again when I go to the post office, particularly these town centre post offices where there's a WH Smith. It's the main post office, but it's in WH Smiths and it's not functioning properly. Anyway, it took me about 45 minutes to get to the front of the queue so that I could actually send this parcel to my mum. And I said to the guy, I'd like to send this special delivery. He said, do you want it for Saturday or for Monday? I said, Saturday, the fastest one, because obviously otherwise it's not going to arrive for Mother's Day. And he said, that'll be £14 then, which I thought, that's a lot, but I coughed it up and put the parcel in the post and thought that took a long time and was very expensive, but at least it will get there in time. Anyway, it did not arrive on time. The postie apologised to my mum, and I'm sure it wasn't his fault, but it arrived on Monday, so after Mothering Sunday. So yeah, that was a bummer, and I was actually quite furious about it. And what makes me even more furious is that this is not an exception. All over the country, people will have been sending cards and packages to their mums and they will have not been arriving. And this is just normal because Royal Mail performance is so bad and deliveries are so often too slow, even though we're paying so much for them. And what we've seen in the news today is that our Royal Mail, our 508-year-old Royal Mail, which was privatised in 2012, is now going to be taken over by Daniel Kretinsky, who is a Czech billionaire. Now, Royal Mail was already separated from the post office back in 2012, so when I'm complaining about the post office, yes, I realise that that is separate from the Royal Mail. However, I don't think it should be. And I think from a household, consumer, public service user point of view, it's all the same service. We want to be able to send letters and parcels. We want to be able to receive letters and parcels. We want it to be affordable. We want it to be timely. We want it to be reliable. And at the moment, we're not getting that, whether we're turning up at a post office with a massive queue or waiting for something to get delivered. And it's really, really frustrating. So what should happen about this? Well, I think there are 5 things. Number 1, we should take Royal Mail back into public ownership where it belongs. Royal Mail was a public ownership success story, and it's something that we should be proud of. It's something that this country used to rely on and know that it belonged to us, and it's been taken away from us. Why? Now it's going to be sold off to a Czech billionaire. The government has done a probe to see whether there are security issues. It has presumably decided that there aren't security issues, but this is critical national infrastructure. It's called the Royal Mail. I don't really see why it should still get to be called the Royal Mail when it's not even owned by this country anymore. And the fact is, it would actually be relatively cheap for the government to buy back Royal Mail. 3.6 billion is not that much. If you put it in the context of the overall national debt, it would be about 0.1% of that debt added to that debt to buy it back. And it's critical. It's national infrastructure. So I think they should do that instead of just allowing it to be taken over. And in the past decade or so, shareholders have received £230 million on average in dividends. And so that is money that could be reinvested back into the service if Royal Mail was in public hands. So number one, buy back Royal Mail, take it back into public ownership. Number two, put Royal Mail back together with the post office where it belongs. The post office and Royal Mail should be connected. And if we look at how things work in other countries, we can see that this is the case. For example, in America. So the US Postal Service is a publicly owned post service, and they are serving nearly 167 million residences, businesses, post office boxes in the US. And the post office in the US says the postal office service generally receives no tax dollars for operating expenses and relies on the sale of postage, products, and services to fund its operations. In other words, it functions the way that Royal Mail and the post office used to function, where Royal Mail made money and the post office was able to be subsidised by that money. If the US can do it this way, surely we can too. Number three, we should decide that we want the universal service obligation to be protected. So back in 2006, Royal Mail lost its monopoly over letters. And obviously there are other companies competing in the parcel delivery space like Amazon, Every, DPD. The thing is, though, is that Royal Mail is still required to deliver the last mile. So Royal Mail has a universal service obligation to deliver to every household in the UK. And so often if you're receiving a parcel from another provider, you may still receive it from Royal Mail if you are living somewhere remote or if that other provider doesn't actually deliver to your address. And I think we need to decide, what do we want Royal Mail to do as a country? I think if you went to people and said, would you like Royal Mail to be back in public ownership? Do you want it to be back with the post office so that dividends can be reinvested? Do you want it to have a setup where it can be financially sustainable? I think people would say yes. Another thing to say in this context is that Amazon isn't necessarily the answer to all our problems. So Amazon has recently been taken to court by 3,000 delivery drivers who are effectively self-employed, so they weren't getting holiday pay, they weren't getting minimum wage. And so Amazon obviously tries to maximise profit, and that is often at the expense of its drivers, and we saw that recently. But I think another argument that is brought up in this context is that the only thing that matters now is parcels, that letters are a thing of the past. I just think that is so wrong. Yes, the number of letters has declined, but people still really value letters. Birthday cards, Christmas cards, anniversary cards, all of these things are important. Letters from your doctor, from the hospital, these are important. Bills and other things like magazines that are time bound, that you want to get on time. All of these things are important. And at the moment, we're paying through the nose. Stamp prices are going up and up. They're just about to increase yet again. A first class stamp is going to be £1.70, which is just absolutely absurd. Privatisation was supposed to be good for us, the consumers, the households. And obviously we've seen the same old story that we see with every other service. Costs have gone up, quality's gone down, we're paying ever more, and yet the service we get is unreliable. And we hear that Royal Mail bosses are telling workers to prioritise sending parcels rather than letters, and so letters just aren't getting delivered, and it's a huge problem for people, communities all over this country. And this isn't the posties' fault. I think posties do a fantastic job. One of my best friends is a postie. I love the postie who comes to our house. I think they do a brilliant job, but obviously somewhere above them are instructions that are not serving us very well. Number 4, I think we need to be thinking about bringing in the different user groups, the different people who care about Royal Mail into its governance structure. So we can have a publicly owned Royal Mail that is accountable to households, to workers, and to wider groups. So, for example, we should be represented as the people who send mail and receive deliveries. Us, the public service users, the households who rely on Royal Mail. We can have groups like the Greetings Card Association on the board of Royal Mail, making sure that the communities that Royal Mail serves are actually represented. And also sub-postmasters and posties could also be represented on the board of Royal Mail, and they could, for example, look at issues like the Horizon scandal and how that is being dealt with. So that could be a way to make a publicly owned Royal Mail more accountable. Royal Mail is a social service, a public service. It's not just about economics. It keeps people together. Your postie is somebody that you see in your community and who helps people not feel lonely. And so it's not just about deliveries. It's also about identity and bringing communities together. And that's the same for Royal Mail and for the post office. Which brings me to number 5. We need to say no to the cuts of our post offices. So here is the full list of the 115 post offices across the UK that are up for closure. These are the Crown post offices, which are directly owned and managed by the post office, and they're mostly in city centres, although not all in city centres. And these 115 branches are at risk of closure, and also 1,000 jobs are at risk. And the scary thing is that WH Smith is also moving off the high street. It's closed lots of its shops in 2024, and more of them are set to close in 2025. A really shocking list of WH Smith shops. And so what on earth is going to happen? So this is absolutely outrageous. We have to stop it, and we are going to be campaigning on this soon. What can you do? There is one thing that it's really important that you can do, and that is to respond to the Royal Mail consultation. Right now, Ofcom is consulting on the universal service obligation and the reduction of letter deliveries from 6 to 3 days a week for second-class post. This must not be allowed to happen. We should not have this legal duty watered down. This is our legal right. We shouldn't let it be watered down just because Daniel Kretinsky wants to make more money from our Royal Mail. So say no to that. Check out the link below. Please like this video if you like it, share it, but most importantly, click on the link below and respond to the consultation. And I'd love to see your comments in the chat below about your experiences of Royal Mail and what you think should happen. Thank you.